we have with us a special guest, Murray Clayson, incoming IFA President. He's going to be at the helm of this premier body on international tax for the next 4 years. British-born, UK-based partner of a well-known law firm, Freshfields. He's a partner in international tax and transfer pricing. Murray, an absolute pleasure to be talking to you. Hearty congratulations on taking over as the IFA President. You will be taking over tomorrow. How does it feel?
Thank you very much, Aaron, and very good to see you again. Too. Great pleasure to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I have to tell you that there's a formal vote this afternoon, so I'm making no assumptions until after that. And
that's a formality.
And the taking over, strictly speaking, is not actually until the end of the Congress, by which time I'll be actually be back on a plane to the UK. So no assumptions yet, but let's keep our fingers crossed.
Absolutely, but we are going to congratulate you nevertheless. Murray, what's going to be your vision for IFA? When Porus was elected the IFA President 4 years ago, everyone said it was a historic moment for diversity, inclusion. The first Asian to become IFA President. He's had his style, tried to expand IFA to different parts of the world. What's going to be up there, right on top of your agenda?
Well, the first thing to say again really is that Porus is an incredibly hard or even impossible act to follow. He has dedicated his life and soul to IFA and the most extraordinary ambassadorial travels around the world, and as you say, developing the branches, visiting the regions, promoting diversity, and I'm not sure I really can live up to that, but we can try and aspire. Certainly on the membership and branch development front, that is an absolutely critical objective. So this is something to pursue at all levels, both from the management of IFA, Central IFA, the board and so on, in promoting initiatives and supporting initiatives when these events are held around the world, but also from the branches. But the branches in turn need the help of the central organisation to develop and grow their membership and get us beyond old white guys like me. We need the full spectrum of members, and the two key constituencies to pursue here are, if I can put it this way, I don't want to say young ladies because that would sound a bit inappropriate, wouldn't it? But the young and ladies.
Gender diversity.
Yes, but also the young. This is the future of IFA, okay? And at the moment, for understandable reasons, you look at the congresses. It costs time and money for people to be here. It's hard. If you're under 30, you have the beginnings of a career in tax. It's quite hard to find the money or persuade someone else to find the money. So we need to address that in some way, and we need to get the branches building their memberships on that front. And on the gender side, we're trying very hard with some success, but we need to develop a much greater participation of women in the panels and the seminars and all of our activities. So huge priority, membership development, branch development and the regions. So Porus put a huge amount of effort into the development of regional organisations in Asia Pacific and Latin America. We are just on the point of developing the work that's been done in Central and Eastern Europe, led by Brian Schneiderman, who was really instrumental in our travelling lectureship programme this year, to build upon that and create a European region, just to align Europe in a sense. It's ironic that Europe, where IFA was born, is now catching up with Asia Pac and Latin America in this sense. But I think it will be a super extra impetus to support particularly the smaller and developing branches in Europe to create this European region. So membership, branches, diversity, all of those things. The one other critical limb to the vision, and again this absolutely echoes everything that Porus has done throughout his presidency, is promoting and preserving and jealously guarding the neutrality of IFA. So as you'll know, we think of IFA as having four constituent pillars, being academia, government, advisors and business. And it is absolutely critical to us that to maintain the trust of all parties, that neutrality is preserved. So we are in no sense whatsoever a lobbying organisation. You will know this over the years, but it's important to me to take this opportunity and every opportunity to get that across, because sometimes it is misunderstood, and just occasionally people get the wrong end of the stick and suggest that we're a lobbying organisation, which is absolutely not the case.
I'll let my partner Amay ask a question.
Last 4 years under Poros's presidency, on the scientific side, we saw an interesting transformation. BEPS became a reality. During your presidency at IFA, the focus is going to be on the implementation of BEPS. How do you see IFA contribute to this whole process of the new order in the international tax?
Yeah, well, it's a big, perhaps the biggest question in international tax that there is around at the moment, and we've had BEPS on our screens now since the initiative began in 2013. I find that the output from OECD, G20, and then building through the inclusive program, an absolutely extraordinary achievement. The sheer volume of work that has been done to create those 15 actions, culminating in the multilateral instrument, this unprecedented piece of international tax architecture, is amazing. So your question is, well, what next? What do we do? And how does IFA play a role in all of this? It's completely central to our program, our technical program, and you'll see it being debated in the forthcoming congresses, as you have here, in the main subjects and through the seminar program. At the same time, our mission really is to promote the scientific technical debate rather than, and I say it again, any sort of special interest lobbying. So it's the pursuit of truth, if you like, rather than any particular agenda to achieve an outcome. So I was asked yesterday by a gentleman, did I think that public country-by-country reporting was right? And this is not for me to say now, okay, because there will be constituencies in government and of course the NGO community who say absolutely it's right, we must have this, and then other sectors, particularly in the business and corporate world, will have their reservations. So no partisanship. I'm getting boring about this, but perhaps I'll leave it alone in a moment, but it's very important. But an intense technical scientific debate to bolster the world's understanding of what all of this stuff really means. And you'll have seen that, for example, in the BEPS and the transfer pricing plenary sessions here in Rio over the last couple of days.
You preempted my next question, Murray, and that's on some of the the topics that have been discussed here. High quality technical discussions, source versus residence tensions, discussions around the MLI, the arm's length principle versus formulary approach, the future of transfer pricing, so many new terminologies like the DEMPI dumps and data manipulable data, and then we also had a wonderful discussion and engrossing discussion on the future of APAs. Your thoughts on the technical discussions that have happened here at the Rio Congress?
Okay, well again, Aaron, that's just a massive question, isn't it? So perhaps I need to pick out one or two topics. First, I want to thank and compliment the presenters, and particularly those guys in the plenary sessions. I personally believe this has represented the quality of IFA discussion moving on. I mean, when I first started attending IFA, and this is no disrespect to anybody back in the 1980s, but the sessions were long in rather dark, overheated halls with simultaneous translation. The
English style, isn't it?
The
Wimbledon style.
Perhaps a bit of that, but I'm afraid, speaking for myself as someone who is hopeless at foreign languages, I spent many hours overheated and uncomfortable in a darkened room with headphones on, listening to simultaneous translation from the other three English languages, which was really challenging, and the format was much more old-fashioned. And this modern, interactive, audio-visual, carefully thought-through, rehearsed, scripted presentation, which does its best to appeal to people of all levels of expertise. So take, for example, the BEPS discussion on Monday, and the first 5-10 minutes were explaining what BEPS was for the benefit of people who might never have heard it. I don't suppose there were many, if any, people in the room who had never heard of BEPS, but nonetheless, it set the scene. But then we got deeper and deeper and deeper into those different actions, and I thought it was fantastic. What else did you pick out? So the transfer pricing piece, which was the day 2 plenary, of great interest to me personally. A little bit more policy-driven, a little bit more political, perhaps.
A little more futuristic.
A little bit more futuristic, yeah. Well, absolutely, and the title, of course, was The Future of Transfer Pricing. I think this is absolutely fundamental to the corporate world now. I'm seeing it in my practice in the UK in action already. So there's this big debate around OECD type materials, the extent to which they take effect retrospectively. And there are different schools of thought between the so-called static and ambulatory approaches to interpretation. Fundamentally, what we're doing is applying domestic law to impose tax on the citizen. So the purists will say, how can a pronouncement from a quasi-governmental body, because the OECD is essentially a club of tax authorities, right? How can their pronouncements affect the meaning of the law as it applies to past periods? The contrary view, of course, is that to the extent that brand new OECD material is clarificatory, then it brings extra learning and wisdom to the table. So I think there are merits in both of those positions, and you just have to pick and choose your points. So if there's some extra interesting elaboration from the world of business reality as to what arm's length means, then all well and good. If what's happening in the new material is subtly moving away from arm's length in its ordinary sense, and there is a view that some of the new material does that, for example in the intangibles field, or your DEMPI dumps, then that's a little bit more controversial as to whether that can have any effect for pre-BEPS periods. So what else, Aaron? Perhaps one other thing to mention, because we could go on all day, couldn't we? But source versus residence, and this is a huge debate, and I would commend to
age-old, never-ending.
Commend to your readers, though many of them will have seen it already. Porus's amazing articles he wrote for NYU on the meaning of source, which he mentioned in the opening ceremony. It's. I see it as a macroeconomic question fundamentally. So ultimately, in my mind, taxing the taxing rights of nations is all about sovereignty. So if a country which has an instinctive preference for source-based taxation, so traditionally the importers of capital and technology, that is their right. The question then is, how do you reconcile that with a standardised international treaty model which has arm's length all over it? And what does that mean? Very controversial topics here around the value of the market. I heard someone say in one of the plenaries, the new world of international tax allocation is all about value creation. And then in the next breath that person...
With no clarity on what is value.
Well, in the next breath that person said, and of course that means the market. But then it was said, how do you create value? And the answer was, well, you make stuff and sell it. Okay, so does the market create value? It's a hugely controversial question when set against the arm's length standard. I wonder whether we are going to see actually a much greater emphasis on indirect taxation. So if what market states want to do, if I can call them that, the states which have these huge populations, the expanding middle classes who want to buy and consume things, if those states want more tax from that industry sector, perhaps the focus needs to realign a little bit around indirect taxation and taxation on consumption. So we hear the popular media misapprehension that flows from statements such as Corporation X only paid this amount of tax on its turnover of this, okay, which of course totally misses the point that corporation tax is not applied to turnover, it's applied to profit. If you want to tax turnover, you need a consumption tax. So I think it's this is going to run and run, but absolutely the powerful developing market states are going to be looking with some economic and political justification for a greater piece of the pie.
Continuing with the thread on the source and the residence tension, and also the emphasis on the market in the context of value creation, just if you look at the example of UK, Australia, New Zealand, you have examples of diverted profit tax. In a way, in philosophy, they are trying to tax the activities taking place in a jurisdiction, in a market, in a sort of a different way. So is that going to be the emerging trend in the years to come? I mean, you call it a diverted profit tax XYZ, but essentially it's leaning towards the source-based taxation. Any thoughts on this?
Yes, I mean, again, it goes to the heart of this philosophical question. The diverted profit tax, or DPT, immensely controversial in the UK. The ministers that sponsored its introduction, as much as acknowledged that it was a political response to public perceptions of supposed multinational tax avoidance. It is controversial, of course, because it goes beyond traditional measures of transfer pricing in the arm's length model, and so we see, for example, US corporations on the wrong end of this who will say, the premise is I do not have a PE in the UK. My relevant entity has a tax treaty with the UK that says you cannot tax me unless I have a PE in the UK, and now you're going to tax me, and at the same time say that DPT is not within the scope of the treaty. And this is very controversial and creating a good deal of agitation, but it's not going to go away. And as you observe, Australia are there. I mean, interested in the parallels is drawn with the Indian equalisation levy, of course. So a little bit different, of course, because as I understand it, that's a tax on gross receipts by reference to advertising revenue, but a very similar sort of target as a philosophical matter. Will there be more of it? Well, the UN, I think, last time I looked said there were 193 countries in the world, though I think there are different ways of counting it. It would be surprising if some others don't follow suit in some way or other.
Your advice, what's going to be your advice to your clients over the next 24 months or so as BEPS is implemented? And are you largely, is there some change of mindset that you're already seeing? 4 years back when we first discussed BEPS, or some part of it at the Copenhagen Congress, if I recollect correctly, there were a lot of skeptics. And now you have someone like a Philip Baker saying that the jury is out or still out on whether the MLI means tax peace or possible upending of tax treaties and therefore tax wars. But are you seeing a change in mindset among the corporations?
Yes, absolutely.
More conservative?
Let's say a significant upbeat in attention to detail around structuring and substance. So I think this is only a post-BEPS phenomenon. The importance on and the focus upon careful implementation of corporate transactions and corporate structuring predates BEPS. And an example, I'm sure you have a parallel of this in India. An example is taking care over managing corporate tax residents. So you have your new POEM concept in India. We had quite an interesting new case law decision a couple of weeks ago in the UK, essentially going to the substance of the management of a company. And again, if I cast my mind back 20-25 years, when every UK-headed multinational had a so-called Dutch mixer company, and some of those groups at the time paid scant attention to the substance of the residents and the management of the Dutch holding company. But it's just not the way of the world now. And this extends, going back to your DEMPI functions, for example, on the IP front, to scrupulous management and backing your IP holding and licensing and development structures with people and substance and activity. So it is no longer going to work simply to transfer via a piece of paper your billion-dollar patents into a tax haven and then license them out and roll up the money. People will be ill-advised to do that. Not least from a transfer pricing point of view, but it's absolutely the target of the likes of the DPT initiatives. So substance, attention to risk, which is loomed into view as a critical aspect to be analysed in testing substance again.
For all our viewers, Murray is a rugby fan. And if we were to talk about BEPS in rugby terminology, that was a hard tackle by OECD, wasn't it?
Hard tackle. Yes, but remember there are still some very swift wingers out there who can run round the forwards. So not all is lost for the corporate world.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the source residence tensions that we were talking about, you are suddenly seeing direct questions emerge at this Rio Congress on whether the EU has a anti-US bias. You're also seeing the EU-US tensions now. That's not developing country tensions. That's developed country tensions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Pascal also referred to European schizophrenia in the context of market approach. And so yes, I think more than the developing, the source residence essentially is the core of it, and I think that tension is going to grow further.
It's possibly also a reflection of the fact that post-Lehman crisis the world changed, which was the first trigger point possibly for the G20 to consider BEPS, and the tax pie, everyone wants that share of the tax pie, which is not expanding in a big way, really.
No, absolutely. Well, again, many different and intersecting and complex points there. I prefer to think, rather than there being a tension between source and residence concepts, which of course technically and intellectually there is, but I prefer to think of there as being a sensible and pragmatic way forward, which breaks free of the dogma and respects individual countries' national economic interests. If you go right back to why people sign treaties, treaties are agreements and compromises, and they are based upon the respective parties' economic and sovereign interests. And if India or China come to the table and say, we have a massive market that wants to buy your stuff, but when our market buys your stuff, we think that we deserve a slightly bigger piece of the pie, or maybe a much bigger piece of the pie. Of course, it is a relevant dynamic, and we don't have to have tension. We have to have countries coming together to sign treaties which are in their mutual interests. So somebody has to be very smart with the macroeconomic thinking and analysis of trade flows to understand where you cut the pie.
Murray, it took 10 years for India to renegotiate the Mauritius Treaty. having realized all about trade flows and how pressing a need it was for India to close that capital gain loophole. Last question, a quick one. When are we going to see the IFA Congress back in India?
Oh gosh, well, you may know that the process of awarding congresses to applicant countries
it's stricter than Olympics.
It's a 7-year process at the moment. So the branches apply. They say we would like to host a congress. It's going to be great, to use that expression, because we have the right people, the right venues, the right infrastructure, and we know how to do it and expertise. And submissions are made. And actually, you mentioned the Olympics. There's another amusing parallel that tends to be drawn with FIFA, which sounds, of course, a bit like IFA, though not all comparisons are necessarily welcome. There are many countries in the queue at any one time. We tend to appoint through, as I say, 7 years in advance. India is absolutely there on the list. There are several, as you know. So we have Seoul, London, Cancun, Berlin, and so on, already in the pipeline. But absolutely, India, we will be back in India before too many years.
Absolute last question. 12 months from now, at the Seoul Congress, what do you think we will be discussing here when we do the interview again?
Discussing with me or discussing in the Congress?
Discussing with you.
Oh, wow. I mean, I would love to be able to say, look at the fantastic Congress we're partway through in Seoul. Look at the amazing technical program, the interaction, the whole IFA buzz of this Congress. I would love to be able to say to you we've made progress with the branches, with membership and all of those philosophical issues that we started talking about. And of course, here we are, we've built our relationships with government, we've developed our gender and country diversity amongst the membership, and IFA has gone from strength to strength, carried on the amazing work that Paulus has achieved over the last 4 years, and it's going to be great.
Thanks, Murray. Thanks a ton for talking to Taxsutra, and on behalf of our entire leadership, wishing you the best for your tenure as IFA President. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.